thank you for coming out here to Primghar on O'Brien County on a Saturday morning. We'd like to welcome you. So town halls exist first and foremost for the constituents of the 4th District to hear directly from their representative. We thank you for submitting your questions, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can in the hour that we have. We'll prioritize questions from citizens of the county first, and District 4 secondly, so you might see me shuffling through numerous questions, and this is just to group them in an orderly fashion. We won't shy away from difficult questions this morning, and we'll draw them and ask the constituents to read them. And we'll have staff floating around with a microphone. Jim is back in the room. Jim, could you raise your hand? Perfect, right up here. So we thank you again for coming on a Saturday morning to attend the town hall and hear directly from Congressman King. We look forward to a civil and good discussion. That means you too, Congressman. So if you wouldn't mind, join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and stand.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Steve King grew up in a law enforcement family in Storm Lake, Iowa. He attended Denison Community High School, where he met Marilyn Kelly, whom he married in 1972. The Kings have lived in Kyron since 1976. They have 3 grown children and 8 grandchildren. King started King Construction in 1975 and built the business up from one bulldozer. He served in the Iowa Senate for 6 years and was elected to Congress in 2002. King now represents the 4th District of Iowa. He believes the Constitution means what it says and should be read with the intent of the Founding Fathers. King is never caught without a copy of the Constitution in his coat pocket. So please welcome 4th District Congressman, Representative Steve King.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks for the welcome here this morning. You know, what a guy will do to draw a crowd in Primghar, huh? But I do appreciate you all coming out. There's a little snow out there, but it's nothing for us Iowans. And first of all, how many of you here are from O'Brien County? You raise your hand, please. A whole lot of O'Brien County people. Good, because you're the first people we want to speak to today. And if we've got time, we'll listen to everybody else too. But I want to let you know that I owe you my best effort and my best judgment. And I've said that for years. And you know that, and I believe I've lived that. But the second thing I was going to tell you is that, you know, we were going to figure out how to get the government opened up today. And due to some events that happened last night in Congress, I don't think we're going to need to take that topic up or at least solve that problem for in the short term until February 15th. There's no reason to cancel this meeting this morning because of that, though. Let's go on with some other topics while we're at it. And I'll just say a few things, and I'm going to save as much time as possible to be able to take your questions and answer your questions. First of all, you know, the big subject that's before us all, that some might refer to as the elephant in the room, is a situation of a New York Times quote. And it is stunning and astonishing to me that 4 words in a New York Times quote can outweigh 20-some years of public service, 20-some years of giving you my word every day, and not one soul has stood up and said that I've ever lied to you or misrepresented anything or given it to you in any spin that's anything other than what I believe to be the objective truth. And I even think about Brett Kavanaugh. When he went through that inquisition, he at least had accusers. I don't have accusers either. Not one soul has stood up and said Steve King has ever acted in a racist fashion, that he's ever discriminated against anybody. There's plenty of evidence out there to the contrary. It is, I think, worth noting that while they were spending millions of dollars calling me a racist coming up to the last election, that we were doing 12 events altogether for the Tanzanian Miracle Kids, which most of you know about by now. We organized 11 of them altogether, and 7 of them, staff was there, and I was in other places. 4 others I attended. We raised tens of thousands of dollars for the STEM operation in Tanzania, including the Tanzanian Miracle Kids. I met with Iowa State's President Wendy Wiederstein to plan a day that would establish a satellite program in Tanzania for Iowa State in agriculture. All this was going on while the others were campaigning against me, calling me a racist. Now, the good book says you shall know them by their fruits. You can't know them by the words of others. The words of others are enemies. But know them at least by their fruits. And so here's another topic that is in front of us. And I happened to just kind of by random, this popped up this morning as I was reading some material. And you'll recognize the source, but I want to give you the words first before I tell some of you who don't recognize the source. It says this: if you control the language, you control the argument. If you control the argument, you control the information. If you control the information, you control history. If you control history, you control the past. He who controls the past controls the future. Some of you recognize, I see the smiles on your face, George Orwell, 1984. We've arrived at this place. It might be after 1984. We have maybe gone beyond where George Orwell imagined. But we have the left that's policing our language. And they're adding definitions to this English language that aren't in Webster's dictionary, but you will see them in the Urban Dictionary. And they're trying to control the language, then they control the argument, then they control the information, then they control history. If they control history, they can control the future. They know that. And I've resisted that for a long time. I insist that we look each other in the eye and tell each other the objective truth. And we call out people that are taking us away from that, because there's no way that we can be a free constitutional republic if we don't have freedom of speech, thought, and expression and assembly. We're doing all of that here today. And if we do that right, we can identify our problems, and we can debate the solutions, and we can come to the best conclusions. And that's what our republic is based on. The United States House of Representatives, 435 members. If we don't have open debate, if we can't discuss these things openly and hammer this out, sometimes passionately, then we can't get to the solutions. And I've watched in my time in Congress as more and more power has gone to the top, and less has been available to your representatives and the representatives across this country. About 2.5 years ago or so, they shut down the open rules. And now you can't even offer an amendment on the floor of the House of Representatives unless leadership, the Speaker of the House approves that there will be debate on that topic. That's how bad that is. And so I take my debate outside that, sometimes to the press. And I'm going to confess to you here, I've made more than one mistake. Well, we all have. I should have never done an interview with the New York Times. But you can tell you how it got to that point. I answered the phone call in the morning. I wasn't ready. I thought I should hear every word that everybody said, so I got a little hearing assistance here. It's wired into my iPhone. It wasn't set up that morning. I said, call me back in 10 minutes. I'm busily wiring it up, putting new batteries in, getting my phone so it works right. And he called back. I wasn't ready yet again. I was half ready. Before I really got it all figured out, I was in an interview. Well, I'm open. I talk to people. And there was no way for me to tape it on my end, and he didn't tape it on his end. There is no tape. It's 56 minutes long. And out of that 56 minutes, he chose those words and punctuated them the way he did. But what I was addressing was not those terms of white supremacy or white nationalism. Yes, he fed those terms to me, and yes, I responded to his question about them. But when I said, why did that language become offensive, I was speaking exclusively and directly about Western civilization. They are denigrating Western civilization today. And if they can break down Western civilization and turn it into the scourge of history, then our freedom is gone, and there's nothing left to fight for. A week ago Friday, Mark Stein was on Rush Limbaugh. He took this topic up for 20-some minutes. And in that period of time, he talked about what happens. What happens when they take, and he said, why can't Republicans find a hill to fight on? They wouldn't fight on transgender bathrooms. They wouldn't fight on defunding Planned Parenthood. And now they've sacrificed Western civilization. And I'll get news for you, he said. There's no hill left to fight for if you sacrifice Western civilization. So I'm in the middle of this battle. You asked me to do this. That's my opening statement on this. And there's a whole lot, I'd like to say, but I wanted to put this in a compressed fashion so that you could see what's going on here. And I think that, as I hear from you, I'll do my best to answer your questions as directly and concisely as possible. I appreciate you all being here, and I really appreciate, especially the O'Brien County people who are here. You are some of the best there are, and I love seeing you at the events we do, and I'm always happy to come back to O'Brien County. So I'm going to turn this over to Colby for how he's managing the questions, and we'll take them in the order that he's described.
Perfect. So the first question this morning is going to come from Bill Klinker regarding committee assignments, and the second question will come from Kathy Winter. So Bill Clinker, are you here? Perfect.
Mr. King, I just want to know how you feel you'll be able to properly represent the citizens of the 4th District without committee assignments.
Well, Bill, that's a fair question. And it's been very rare that's ever happened before. And this happened abruptly. There's only one person that made this decision, that was Kevin McCarthy. And you know, we have an opportunity to restore that if there's enough of if there's enough voice that comes out of this district and across the country. And there have been over 200 national leaders that have already signed a letter that goes to Kevin McCarthy, and that I'll say admonishes him rather than me. But the reality is, today and for unforeseen future, I won't be seated on small business, agriculture, or judiciary. Now, if it were going to come at any time, this is about as good a time as it could, given that we finally got a farm bill done, and it's in the can, and so that there'll be dust collecting on the seats in the Ag Committee, generally speaking, throughout the next probably 3 years or so. So I don't think that is going to be nearly as big as impact as it would have been, say, 2 years ago. Second is small business usually does smaller issues that don't have big, profound changes across the country. But again, you know, I care a lot about small business. I've been in that all my life. The other thing that's of importance is we lost the majority. And losing the gavels means you lose the agenda. So there's no bill that I would bring through any of those committees that Nancy Pelosi was going to let move. This is going to be a hardcore agenda. I've seen her do this before. There were 4 years of Nancy Pelosi before. And so, you know, I don't think we can be proactive in those committees. We're only playing defense in those committees. And in some cases, it'd be good for me there to be play defense. The committee that I'll be missed the most is the Judiciary Committee. And I sat in there as a spectator through 3 days, the last 3 days of the impeachment of Bill Clinton. I saw the rhythm of that. I've sat on that committee now for 16 years. And that committee needs to be ready to play defense because they will use it aggressively to bring the members of the Trump administration forward for their political excoriation experience. And you need seasoned members there that are willing to give an opportunity to defend themselves and to defend them. And I expect the odds are 70% or so that they will attempt an impeachment of Donald Trump. That's where they will miss me, and I regret that. But there's also a chance that that could possibly be restored before that should happen. So, but still, I'll vote on the floor. I'm the only one I know that has an ability now to go down and speak on every bill on the floor, every amendment on the floor, every bill and amendment for the Rules Committee as well. And it does free me up to do some other things. I already decided that going into the minority, the opportunity to be proactive is limited within the legislative process because Nancy Pelosi will kill off any good ideas. And so, and you've seen it already. So I already decided I will turn more of my attention to working with the Trump administration, the executive branch, the West Wing of the White House, and the president himself. That's actually sometimes a more effective way than even when we're in the majority. So I will do all of those things, and I'll be back here throughout all this district. I've been to all 382 towns in this district. I hope I can do it again, but I'll be there to vote on everything on the floor, and I'm going to try to find a way to get myself to be more effective rather than less effective. But I can't tell you that's going to happen. I can only tell you I'm going to try, Bill. Thank you very much.
And the next question is from Kathy Winter. Another question kind of about life after committee assignments. And the question after that is going to be from Donna Dykstra regarding the border crisis.
Testing that up and just get a dead mic here, will we?
How about this one? Testing 1, 2, 3.
I'll see if it's enough.
Sounds good. Sorry about that. Kathy would.
Yeah, I don't need a microphone.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
My question would be, considering that you have no committee assignments, can we as taxpayers expect to see any fiscal savings on staff or travel reductions?
Well, I haven't given that any thought, but I'm approaching it this way. So all my staff is working hard, and I'm going to keep them working hard. We've never had enough staff. So we will put that staff out there to push harder and harder on some other issues along the way. And they are freed up to pay a little more attention to constituent services. By the way, while I have this opportunity, I want to thank my staff for being some of the best staff there are in the country for constituent services. And I say even Tom Harkin, when he was in office, would say that publicly. that we've had great constituent services. We're in the business here to help people. And if we lose the ability to do that, it'll break our hearts. So that's what we intend to do. We're going to go out and do an even better job of constituent services, and we're going to push the agenda. The travel piece doesn't really change very much because our staff is not doing a lot of traveling. They're either here in the district as they would be doing the outreach, and it isn't very often that any of my staff in DC gets on an airplane to go anywhere.
I guess I was addressing your overseas travel.
Well, I don't know that I've given that a lot of thought either. I know that there's been a fair amount of misinformation about overseas travel, and some of it was fabricated, some of it was just distorted, and some of it was true. I have a couple of obligations. I'm a delegate to the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe. There are 57 member nation states, and I represent the United States in that. Often when I take a trip to a place like that, I'm jumping into an empty seat on a military aircraft and taking that ride. It's going to cost the same amount whether I get in that seat or whether I don't. That's not calculated in the reports that you're seeing. So at this point, I don't plan on going on any congressional delegation trips as, say, Nancy Pelosi had planned. I don't plan on that. I don't know what obligations might come, but I can tell you that I made 2 trips to Taiwan, and I've met with their last 2 presidents, President Ma and President Tai, built personal relationships with them. We brought the Taiwanese back here, and we have solidified what now is a perennial trade agreement for about $2.7 billion worth of grain, and they say about 90% of that grain comes out of Iowa, and they upped their soybean purchase by 27% as a result of this last trip. I took them through from say the heart of Iowa up to Newell to a soybean, or up to, Nevada to a soybean producer, and was then with them on the bus all the way across, clear up to Hinton, and all the way pointing out to them that they've never seen before, horizon to horizon row crop production. And we have built that kind of relationship with them, and that's the kind of deal that we could lose if I stopped travel. But by the way, the Taiwanese paid for both of those trips over there. And I've sent 6 of my staff over there, one at a time, on different trips to tie those relationships together. And they went each time, one at a time over there, funded by the Taiwanese. So I'm going to do what I think is right for this district. And by the way, I have another trade agreement that I'm working on in a completely different country that no one seems to know about, and you won't. I won't tell you about the subject or the details of it today, but it could be far larger than the Taiwanese deal and do far better for our Iowa producers. So I'm going to keep doing what I think is right. The travel expense is a piece that it's awfully hard to look at it objectively and come down to a bottom line number. Thanks for your question. Next.
Well, the next question is from Donna Dykstra.
And Colby, if you can get a microphone to Donna or whoever, I want to either have you or Jim repeat it into the microphone because the press will appreciate that.
I got a backup microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. King, I was just wondering what's your opinion? Do you think in the next 3 weeks there's any possibility of getting this border crisis or wall funded going? What hope do we have?
We're trying to, thank you, Donna, and we've been working at this for a long time. The president essentially is saying to Congress, you've got one more shot at this. He's maybe even one more shot after that, I'd guess, given that he didn't stick with this one the way I thought he had said he would. I think in the end, the president's not going to give up. He's going to build a wall. And if the price is too high for that in the negotiations, if we actually get negotiations between now and February 15th, then I think that he's closer to declaring a state of emergency. I have said to him that you have the legal authority to do that, and I will support your efforts to do that. I'm out of patience with this argument, and I think the quickest way to get them to the bargaining table is start building the wall. And so that's my advice to him. Take the resources you have access to, take the laws that give you the clear statutory authority to protect our country and our borders, and go ahead and start building the wall. And you all know that I built a wall on the floor of the House of Representatives in 2006. I have had, I'll say, I don't want to call it anything special, but I'm often looking over the horizon to what's coming down the pike. I'm not one of those people that is focused on just reacting to what's in front of me. I want to be able to see what will we encounter.
And as I watched what was happening clear back then in that 2003 through 2007 and 8, we had Border Patrol testimony before the Immigration Committee in the House of Representatives that said that they had 1 million border crossing attempts a year that they interdicted. And I asked them under oath, what percentage of the attempts do you interdict? And they said under oath, well, we think maybe 25%. So that meant 4 million were attempting to cross the border in a single year, and we stopped 1/4 of them, 1 million, and 3 million made it in. A few went back, a few died, the rest are still here. And I looked at that and I thought, how many is that a day? 11,000, actually a night, not a day. 11,000 a day was the rate. We have to do something, and there's all the reasons that you know, and I'm really glad that we've elected a president that understands this, and I encourage him to stand on principle. Thanks, Donna. How are we doing?
Find out in the law.
We actually beta tested everything.
Testing 1, 2, 3. All right, sorry about that, everybody. We had the wireless microphones, and technology can be a best friend or a worst enemy. So the next question is from Jay Hoffman regarding to the shortage of agricultural workers.
And that will work if we can bring them to the front when they're on deck.
Perfect.
Jay?
Morning, Congressman King.
Jay.
I visited with you a few times in Washington, D.C. I feel we need after looking at border security, I feel we need a guest worker program, but it needs to work for the livestock industry. The H-2A program is too short of a time frame. I guess I want to see once where you stand on that, because we need probably a 2-year program to get those people in and train them either for livestock production or packing facilities.
Well, thank you, Jay. And most folks in here will know where I've stood on this, and I don't want to reward people for breaking the law. If you do that, you erode the rule of law. I want to restore the respect for the rule of law. That's been the center of my immigration position all my adult life, clear back to 1986. But, Jay, in response and reaction to the statement and the positions that you have taken and others, and I've heard quite a lot of a similar statement, and I know what you're saying is a real need for our producers here. And I had this conversation with the president back in October, and I pointed out to him that he has the authority, the legal authority. We're always digging down into his statutes and case law, and that the president has the legal authority to require a bond. And I'll support a program that helps these kind of employment requirements, provided that they are bonded. So if the law says over a period of time that they go back home, that they actually go back home. And I want that to be blanket across something like 40% of some will say 50% of the illegal aliens in America are visa overstayers. And we've been pushing out a bill, and I've been pushing this for a long time. The president could do it if he just by executive action. But I have a bill that does this. Yeah, just say that you're in another country, you want a visa to come into America, and you apply for that visa. We say, okay, enter the information on your credit card, and we'll record that. We record the credit card as a potential billing, and when you return back home, and according to the visa, then we release the hold on your credit card. If you don't return back home by the date, then we bill your credit card and use that money, and it goes into a law enforcement fund. That's essentially the bill that I've introduced. But I'll support being able to bring in legal labor, provided we bond them, if the condition is that they go back home at the end of a period of time, whether it's a year or 2 years or whatever it might be. And but we are in this situation. I'll just say that if I'd had my way back in the beginning, back in say 2003 and 4, we would have secured the border, we would have built the wall, we would have shut down illegal crossings into America, we would have shut down a lot of illegal drugs coming into America, and at that time we would have restored also the respect for the rule of law, and we reach that point, then we can have more open discussions about the things you're talking about, but this dialogue gets all wrapped up in the 20 or more million people that are illegally in America, and the whole flow of illegal drugs and the occasional terrorists that come across. That's bogging this thing down. We can't get to the rational solutions because we have irrationally let our borders stay open and not secured them. And the first thing is secure the border and then talk about everything else. And I think maybe we will get get down to that if the president declares a state of emergency, but I don't think the Democrats are going to agree with that. And that's only going to make you partially satisfied, I know, Jay. But you have moved me on this, so thanks for speaking up.
Thank you, Jay. So the next question will be from Lori Scroggin, and the question following that will be from Tom O'Brien from Sanborn.
Lori?
Mr. King, I'm glad to have you here with us today, and we just want you to know that we support you and we love your conservatism, and we pray that they never silence you. We need you. My question really was twofold, really about homeland security, drug trafficking, human trafficking, disrespect for our country. When they do cross illegally, I would like to see them here legally, so we can treat them like good human people. But, they come across illegally and they get treated badly, and it's just a never-ending cycle. And so that's just from, those of us that live here in O'Brien County, in a huge agricultural society. We see a lot more than maybe some other, New York City, they don't quite see what we see, or maybe even in Washington, D.C., they don't see what we see out here in Iowa. So I just pray that you can work with Capitol Hill, make them understand that the border will service the whole country, and not just our country, but the world. I mean, people will be treated with respect if we have laws. Without laws, we have absolutely no respect for each other as human beings, and for the United States of America, which we love, and for the world. So we just pray that you can actually speak to the people at Capitol Hill and make them understand that a wall will protect our country. It will make us safe. I think that the Constitution was written for homeland security and defense of this country. And when we allow them to come into our country illegally, it weakens our defense. And not only does it weaken our defense, we fall prey to the world. So I guess I just want to cut it short here and just say I think it's really important that we build the wall and that we move forward as a country and not divided, but that we work together both sides of the aisle and do it for the best of everybody here.
Lori, thanks for your prayers. Thanks for that sentiment. I hope the rest of the country hears what you said today. And there are people that will say that walls are immoral and nations shouldn't have borders and that there's a right to migration. These are all pretty much new ideas as far as our political dialogue is concerned. And then they'll quote scripture. And so it comes to mind as I listen to you, St. Paul's Mars Hill sermon in Acts 17, where he said, he said, and the Lord made all nations on earth, and he decided when and where each nation would be. We have a full right to secure our borders. We cannot be a sovereign nation unless we do secure our borders. Something has to define it. We are a law-respecting nation, and the nation to our south has increasingly become controlled by the drug cartels. And I have traveled down into that area on a Codell once years ago, on your dime, by the way, and I learned a lot. And I met with the cabinet members up in Mexico City, and they served tequila at 11 o'clock in the morning. I thought I should take one for the team. Sometimes it's not easy. That's not my idea for breakfast. But also, I traveled up and down and in there, and I sat with the Border Patrol. I camped out with them for as many as 4 days altogether, and day and night. Listen, you learn a lot when their guard comes down. And just the other day, I met with the ambassador to the United States from Guatemala, come into my office. And so I asked him point blank, are people in Guatemala mortgaging their homes in order to pay the drug cartels to smuggle their children and grandchildren on that trail of death all the way up to the United States? Are they mortgaging their homes to do that? And he said, well, yes, that happens. They may not know why the bankers may not know why they're mortgaging it, but it happens. And you've seen some statistics come out from the White House and from Kirstjen Nielsen, who I think is, she's really been accurate with the facts that she's delivered here. but some statistics, and they don't match up to be the ones that I heard. In a trip down there, I went through the transfer houses where they're taking unaccompanied alien minors, and they will house them there until they find a place to ship them up into the United States. Walked in and talked to them, usually through an interpreter. I asked the workers there in several locations, and I asked them, how many of these girls are sexually abused or raped on the way up from their Central American country into the United States? And their answer wasn't the 31% that you heard from DHS, it was 75%. And I asked how many of them get birth control before they leave, and they say, that's 100%. So can you imagine being a grandfather, and you're gonna send your daughter out of El Salvador, and you walk down the street to the pharmacy where you don't need a prescription, and you pick up RU-486 morning after Plan B pill, monthly supplies of contraceptives, and you start your 13 or 14-year-old daughter on contraceptives, and you're going to send her through that knowing that 3 out of 4 girls that go up there are going to be raped on the way up to America. That's one of the things that we're perpetrating here by having open borders in the United States. And 80 to 90% of the illegal drugs consumed in America come from or through Mexico. And they stopped enough fentanyl to kill every American. That's how bad that is. And we lost 74,000 Americans to drug overdoses last year. And it's killing people. And more people died in 1 year than were killed in all of the 10 years of the Vietnam War to a drug overdose. And we don't have a handle on that because we can't secure our borders. And I've been down there when I learned from the Border Patrol when they picked up a person of interest from a nation of interest, and they hand them over to the FBI. And at the moment that happened, it's a classified event. But I've been there to get the information that it's 7 of them that I know about in the little few days that I've spent all together. So our nation is at risk because of terrorists coming across, 80 to 90% of the illegal drugs coming across, the illegals coming in. We've got sexually abused girls and boys. I won't even state to you what I hear about the sexually abused boys. It's too hard for me to believe. That's some of the things we're talking about here. But if we have a border that's respected, and we respect the rule of law, we can also respect the people. And that's, I think, the center of your point. And not only did God make all nations on earth, but He created all of us in His image. And I believe that deeply. And we need to be able to express that in all of our activities in this state and in this country. Thank you, Lord. Thanks.
Yep. So the next question is from Tom O'Brien regarding the Tanzanian children. And then on deck is a question from Ann Slattery about economic development.
I'm going to speak for my brother now. His question was about these kids from Tanzania, how they got here, how they're doing now, and that whole process. Everybody might not be familiar with that. And, you know, you being accused of being a racist and all that other stuff, and I know you're not, Steve, I've known you forever. But what you went through to get them here and that whole process, I think everybody deserves to know that.
Well, thank you. And anybody missed, that's Kelly O'Brien, who has long been the chair here in O'Brien County. I don't know they named the county after you, Kelly, but you're holding up the moniker pretty well, you and Tom are. And thanks for the opportunity to address this. And I'll put it this way, is that I was on a trip through the Balkans. It was in May of 2017. And I happened to have been in Sarajevo, a meeting with the Sharjah affair there in Bosnia. And I got a phone call from Dr. Steve Meyer. Dr. Steve Meyer is an orthopedic surgeon. He heads up the STEM organization out of Sioux City, and that's the Siouxland, Tanzania Education Medical Ministry. And Marilyn and I have supported that for a good number of years. He's my pheasant hunting buddy. But when I get a phone call from Dr. Steve Meyer, I kind of, so shows up Steve Meyer on my phone, I look at that and I know, okay, this is going to be a request for a miracle. And he is a very determined individual with the deepest faith of anybody I know, and he's pulled off some things that, all for the good, that you would think were impossible when you start. And we've helped him with some of them. Well, this was a bigger mission than he'd ever asked me for before. And he said, Steve, you've probably heard about the tragedy in Tanzania. And I hadn't. And he described it to me. It was a school bus with 38 passengers on it all but 3 of them 10 to 12-year-old kids, Tanzanian kids. And it had gone off the road and nosed down into a ravine. And he had some of his missionaries that were in Tanzania that happened to be behind that bus, third vehicle behind. When that bus went nose down in that ravine, all but the 3 kids in the far back of the bus, everyone was killed. And the missionaries that were there, they jumped out and ran down, and they started to pull bodies out of that bus and bring them out and lay them on the bank and arrange them and pray for them and try to find the survivors. And they had to pull them out of the windows of the school bus to get them out. 3 survivors, and there are 2 girls and a boy. And he said, I've been to visit them in the hospital in Arusha, and he said they're on death's door, and I cannot save them in Tanzania. Now, I know he does surgery in Tanzania. I've seen the results of it, and that's one of the reasons why Marilyn and I have supported STEM for all these years, because of the work that Steve Meyer does. But if he tells me he can't save them in Tanzania, I know he can't, because he would be doing that. And he said, we've got to get them out of there. We've got to get them into Sioux City. If I can get them there, we can provide all the surgery and the medical support, and they have a chance. And so, what do you need from me? He said, visas, passports, and a medevac plane to fly them out of Tanzania as quickly as possible. We're going to lose them if we don't. And so, okay, then I'm going to have to cut some of this short because there's so many details along the way. I called a friend in Tanzania, and his name is Lazaro Nyalandu. He was a candidate for Prime Minister of Tanzania. Friend of mine, friend of Steve Meyer's. Now, God puts these triangles in place when he needs them long years in advance. And I said, we need passports and visas. And he said, I can do the passports. Can you do the visas? And I said, I'll call the U.S. Embassy. I did. Anthony Paglia was working at the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania, and he said, I'll expedite. And by the way, I dropped Lazaro's name. I said, Lazaro's part of this, and you know, can you work with him? Oh, he said, yeah, he's the only candidate that actually answered our calls, so I'll work with him. And so we went to work. We got the visas, we got the passports. The medevac plane was a lot harder, and I made every call that I could think of. I even called Eric Prince, who was the founder of Blackwater Securities. He had a plane in the Middle East, and he said, I've got one. It's leased. It's sitting on the tarmac. And it's $200,000 to fly those kids over to the U.S. And I said, I don't know if I want to spend my kid's inheritance on that yet. Give me 24 hours. And but I put a hold on that plane. I got him down to 185 actually. And then I said, put a hold on it, Eric. Well, I'm still calling. Finally, I got a hold of Reverend Franklin Graham, and it took me about 3 minutes to make the sale to Franklin Graham. And so I'm standing down in a little backwater in Albania with a narrow little cell signal on. My battery's nearly dead. And so I said, okay, Reverend Graham, I'm going to text you Steve Meyer's cell number. I'm going to text your cell number to him. I'm going to encourage each of you to call each other right now because Steve Meyer's ready to fly to the United States. And if he's in the air, he's going to be out of sync for too long. And so I sent off that text. And meanwhile, they're hollering at me, come on, the bus is leaving, the bus is leaving. I said, leave me, I'm going to get this done. I know I can get it done here, or at least I got a shot. And so, in any case, within 5 minutes, Steve Meyer is ready to board his plane to fly out of Tanzania back to the United States, which would have pulled the plug on this operation. And the phone rang, he had no idea it was coming, and it was Reverend Franklin Graham, and he said, well, hello, Dr. Meyer, this is Reverend Franklin Graham. My friend Steve King has called me and asked me to call you. And I'll fly those kids out of Tanzania with my DC-8. And that is what they did. They flew them into Sioux City. They were met with the medical team. They were rushed up to surgery. And there were 25 serious fractures in those kids altogether. There were 2 fractured spines, one neck and one lower spine. One girl was paralyzed from the waist down. And then, so I didn't get back to visit them until they were out of surgery. But we rolled them out of surgery. That's the first time they've been together. And so I've been working with and nurturing these kids all along. And one day Steve Meyer called me and he said, I'm calling to tell you about another miracle. Okay, I'm interested in that. I don't have to actually go to work to bring one about, I guess. And he said, I walked into Doreen's room, the paralyzed girl, and I teased her like I always did, and she kicked me. She kicked me. And and he said, she will walk again. The neurologists tell me I'm wrong, but I know this miracle is going to come about, and she will walk again. And that was a call of great joy. I couldn't wait to go see her again, and of course I did. And he was right, the neurologists were wrong. And in that phone call, we planned the date that we would bring those kids back to Tanzania. And Marilyn and I were on the tarmac that day at Kilimanjaro Airport with thousands of Tanzanians. And they were there to welcome the kids they thought they'd never see again. They'd never seen medical miracles like that in their country. And so when Sadia walked down those steps with roses in her arms, a huge cheer went up. And when Wilson walked down those steps with roses in his arms, and when his femur had been sticking out through the side of his leg just 3 months earlier, there were huge cheers there. But when Doreen walked down those steps on her own power, having been paralyzed from the waist down, it was a great, great roar that went up out of there. And we went over for a 3-hour celebration, and I'll just bring this around to a conclusion with this, that it had prayer, and there was a group that had written songs. They were like the Supremes times 2. Everybody's singing in Swahili, but they were on key, and their harmony was perfect, and it was great. And they had a band that played, and then I saw on the program it said Tanzanian National Anthem. And so they stood with great pride and dressed in their Sunday best out in that heat for 3 hours and sang their national anthem, as strong, as bold, as confident and proud as we sing ours. And while that was going on, I look at the program and it says U.S. National Anthem. I look around and there's Marilyn and me, one of my staff, and Steve Meyer. Steve Meyer standing here, and I leaned over to him and I said, we're really going to have to belt this one out. And we did, with great pride, as proud as I've ever sang the national anthem there that day. And those 3 kids now have been back to say thank you to us. And we took them all over Northwest. Steve Meyer did that too. And now they are the ambassadors to the United States from Tanzania for the rest of their lives in a natural way. And we've launched more good things to help that country. Thanks, Kelly. I made it a long story, but it sure is a fun one to tell. Thank you.
The next question is from Ann Slattery regarding economic development and economic growth. And then on deck will be Lowell Wilson with a question regarding the H-2A visa program.
Good morning. I'm from Spencer, Iowa. Our population has been stagnant since the 1980s. And our city council, our mayor, our city manager have been working like crazy to try to turn that around. Our community members have been working hard. We've lost industry. How can you help us bring young families to our place in particular and prosper economically, but also rural Iowa? We're really suffering, and we need a leg up, and we need you to advocate for us. So how are you going to do that?
Well, and I just know that several years ago, I worked with a group of young leaders in Spencer. That was part of their task. Now, is that group still going, and are you part of it?
Well, I don't know the group what you're talking about.
Okay, I can't give you exactly the name of it from memory now. I can remember some of the faces, but I better not say their names here. But some of those things do help. Here's what's happened here in Iowa. We went into a farm crisis. This was launched because of the grain embargo in 1979. By 1980, we went into an economic tailspin, and money just didn't move. Almost everybody that went through that time had serious trouble, myself among them. And what happened was that, and I can see it all around my neighborhood. My wife was teaching school. We knew all the families. But what happened all around my neighborhood and also all around Iowa and all around the Corn Belt is that those kids would sit down at the supper table and they'd hear the conversation of their parents, and it was this. It might have been subliminal, it might have been direct, but it was, there's no future for you here. There's no economy that's moving, this farm isn't making me money, the livestock isn't making me money, the outside jobs that are going on are few and far between. And so those kids were told, they were taught, I don't know if they were exactly told, some places they were, go get an education, take your degree, and don't look back. And so they moved out. They went to college and they moved out. And they went to places like Texas or out to California or down out to New York or Connecticut. And those people, my neighbors, now buy plane tickets to see their grandchildren. We couldn't keep our kids here in the 80s, and what we're missing now is the children that were born to those children that moved out in the 80s because of that deep economic crisis that we were in then. And so what I think is that we need to push a strong message out here is that we're living right in the best place in the world to live and raise a family. Who wouldn't trade a great deal to be in a peaceful home in Primghar or any other community around here or out on a farm? So all they need is economic opportunity. All they need is good paying jobs. All they need is an opportunity for entrepreneurs to see and be inspired to stay here or come here because of our quality of life. Things that we can do to help that are infrastructure and also high-speed internet services. And you can operate here, if it's good enough, as well as anywhere in the world. I don't know if we advertise that well enough. We watch our families come back in. That's a good thing. But in the end, people are going to migrate towards economic opportunity. And that's what dictated the exodus out in the 80s. And by the way, we taught our kids something exactly opposite from what I've said here. Marilyn and I have 3 grown sons. We went through some of the hardest of times. I remember April 5th, 1985, when we hit bottom. And Marilyn went into the refrigerator and she pulled out the leftovers she had. A little leftover hamburger, she dumped that in the bottom of a casserole. And then she had a little corn and some beans from Pork and Beans. And I think there's some green beans in there too, and she put cornbread on top. It was awful, but it was the feast of the poverty. And I said, we should eat this every April 5th, the rest of our lives, to remind us about what it was like when it was at the bottom. Well, she would never cook it again, and part of me's grateful, but I don't forget. But those 3 sons were told, if you don't like your opportunities, go out and create them. Family matters. Family is important. It's precious. And if we can keep our families together, if we can keep the grandparents close to their children, close to their grandchildren, then we have a real high quality of life. And doing so, it should attract other people here. Today, I can go to church with all 3 of my children and all 8 of my grandchildren on a good day. It doesn't always happen at the same time. Then we go to somebody's house and one of my daughter-in-laws cooks some good food for me. And I have this great grandpa time, and I have a tremendously high quality of life for the times that I'm here. And I'm very, very grateful to that. And I hope that can be something the rest of you can experience too. So the quality of it is great. We don't have enough people yet for the jobs we have. But I think we can be a magnet for people to come here if we tell them what matters here and what kind of quality of life we have.
Well, we are doing that in Spencer. We have great families, we're pro-Spencer, but what are you tangibly going to do, like in Congress, fight for us, advocate for us, any tangible actions?
Or would you give me a tangible recommendation?
I don't know. I'm just so frustrated. We've been working in our community we've been working with different agencies to, lift the arts and culture up so that young people will be attracted, to come, so we have things to do. It is a great place for families. You don't have the jobs.
Spencer's a regional center. This is the same difficulty that exists across this country. Everybody's competing in the same way. And another thing that we have is we have a birth rate that's down now below replacement rate. And that's starting to affect the people that we would otherwise have. And I'm a strong supporter of the pro-life position. And when I think of the missing babies that are part of the...
I want you to go and...
I know you don't want me to talk about that, but there's at least 60 million babies that are missing in this society.
We need tangible actions. We need industry and economic development. We need businesses to come to Spencer. Could you advocate for us? Talk to businesses.
Well, I'll keep doing that. I'll keep working the transportation and working the telecommunications and making sure that you have all of the facilities that you need. I'll keep doing that. I'm all for that. And also, I'll keep my ears open for good ideas. And I hope you can come back to me with some good ideas out of Spencer, or else I'll go up there, we'll do a meeting, and we'll sit down with your people. Deal. We'll make it done. We'll make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ann. The next question is from Lowell Wilson regarding guest worker program. And then after that, we'll have Pamela Harmon of Pauline.
Steve, my question is, we have a huge meat and dairy industry in your district. We have the largest biofuels industry in any place in the United States in your district. Ties into economic activity. What are you doing to help the temporary ag worker program, H2A? And I'd like to hear your future of how are we going to keep the biofuel industry going, because if we continue down big oil's path, which is what some of the administration would like to do, we're done, and there will be no economic activity in your district. I'd like to hear you respond to that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lowell. I've spoken to some degree on the H-2A program, or at least temporary worker program. But until we can secure our border, we aren't going to be able to have a constructive dialogue on the balance of this. But I will support a bonded program, and a bonded program that is hopefully tailored to meet some of these labor needs that we have. But with regard to the renewable fuels, and that deserves, I think, more discussion here in this room, because we haven't brought it up. In the last presidential campaign, there were a lot of television ads that were run that said Steve King didn't support the RFS. None of those ads were true. There's never been a word come out of my mouth of anything other than being supportive of the renewable fuels standard. And I don't believe you can name a stronger advocate for renewable fuels in the House of Representatives than me. I worked in the middle of that all along. I go clear back into the 70s with the renewable fuels. I think you have to live it in order to understand it. It's so integrated into our economy that if you would pull it out tomorrow, you would be amazed at how many things would come to a screeching halt. So Lowell's right on how important this is. Renewable fuels are an integral part of our economy. And the enemies we have, the petroleum lobby in Washington, D.C. is powerful. They are the dream team. And I have sat in the middle of being surrounded by them on a study committee meeting that we have usually Wednesdays at 12:30. They pushed through there a letter that got 186 signatures on it that essentially said, stop the RFS and don't let anything support renewable fuels again. That was driven by the petroleum industry. 186 signatures. That's a powerful lot of names. And by the way, I believe they were all Republicans, I hate to say. And I stand and fight that. And by the way, I was in the Oval Office having this discussion with the president, and some of you have seen where I tweeted out the notes on my hand like Sarah Palin that I had when I walked in there to do that one-on-one with the president a while back, and E15 was right there front and center. That was a Tuesday, and I know a lot of you did a lot of work to promote E15, and I thank you for all that. We are part of that team. I walked in there that day, and about a third of the way into that 75-minute meeting, I knew we were going to get an E15 approval out of the President of the United States. And that was on a Tuesday. He made the announcement 2 days later on a Thursday. You can check the records. But I argued with General John Kelly. It seemed as though that Dream Team Petroleum Lobby had been talking to John Kelly, and he would say, and President, a couple of them, he tested me too. Well, it hurts your mileage, doesn't it? And isn't it bad on your engines? And I said, I have now. I have two Yukons that are flex fuel, and I can go back 750,000 miles, and it's never had anything in it except at a minimum E10, and lots of times all the way up to E85. I've never had a mechanical problem because of it, and I pointed out to them in Watertown, South Dakota, we have, I believe the number is 60 million miles on cars of vintages going back pre-2001 with E30 without a single mechanical problem that's related to fuel. That's how good this product is. And so, but the petroleum industry doesn't like the competition. They had accepted, I think, the idea of a 10%, giving up a 10% volume market share, but they don't want it to go any more than that. When they see E15, they fought it vigorously. We're in a bad spot. They're out lobbying us. And we get people that come out, once a year, twice a year. They do a pretty good job while they're there. But I tell the corn growers, pick your best-looking young guys, give them a fresh haircut, a good suit, and send them into the staff where there's young ladies working on the ag department in there, and tell them, we don't eat this corn. We turn this corn into fuel. There's a surplus of starch in the world, and the world is protein short. We turn the starch into energy and convert the protein into a high-value fuel. And that's a whole industry out there that's brought a lot of livestock back into America. And by the way, I'm a little bit joking with them, but I think the corn growers can do that, and I've seen them do it. We need a lot more voice in Washington, D.C. We're vastly outnumbered by the petroleum industry. They have a lot more money. They have more people. And so if I bring up anything in the House that promotes renewable fuels, it makes it vulnerable to the assault that will come from the petroleum lobby. So I fight them off when they bring it up, but I don't initiate because I'm concerned we'd lose. but keep the facts out in front of them over and over again. We're faced with the expiration of the RFS in 2022. Then it becomes a discretionary decision on the part of the administrator of the EPA. And that's Mr. Wheeler, whom I've sat with several times, and I have a hard time getting a commitment out of him, but I am making sure that he understands what we think here. And I invited him to Iowa within a week of the time that he was named as the temporary administrator. And then, I had it set up for the entire Iowa delegation to meet with him, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate. And one of those members pulled out of the meeting, and the EPA canceled the meeting. He came to Iowa anyway for the state fair, so he was actually staying at the Holiday Inn Express. And I thought, what an opportunity. We could both be experts if I just catch him in the lobby. And so we sat there in the lobby for about 40 minutes, and I expressed to him all the things I think he needed to hear. And he said, I think I've heard this all already. And I said, then I got more for you. And I did. And we're going to keep that up. The president is on our side, but there's powerful forces pushing on him constantly. So I'm absolutely with you on that, Lowell, and I'll keep doing it, and I'll keep the fight up for renewable fuels. Thank you.
So being mindful of the time, it's 9:56, so we'll take one more question from Pamela Harmon, and then in her closing remarks. So Pamela Harmon.
Congressman King, thank you so much for coming. As I came up today, I thought it must be difficult to come with the difficulties you've been through to come back and face your constituents. And I was wrong. You're proud, you're talented, and we're proud of you, and thanks for coming to see us. And we support you. I want to have comments when I do a question. I love politics, and I don't know, I was a nurse all my life, and when I had time, what I settled into doing was studying politics, and I think Donald Trump brought that to the forefront for me. I watch Fox, I think 18/7 every day of the week, and so I study the Constitution on the internet. Hillsdale College has courses on the Constitution, and all the answers are in the Constitution. I think the problem is we're going to lose our Constitution if we don't get serious. There's a serious progressive movement out there that wants to take us away from the America that we know. And we all get focused on our specific problem that pertains to us. But right now, we've got a bigger problem, and that's saving this country. And I do believe that everything that happens in Washington right now, it's all connected. It's not an event like your event here, and a Kavanaugh event here, and a Pelosi filibuster here, or whatever. It's all coordinated. It's a progressive movement to change this country. And one of the things that I was bothered by when you had this problem was the reverse racism toward the white European man that founded this country. And that's the values that we're built on. And we have to be embarrassed to say anymore that we're white European background. And I think that is wrong, and I think we need to push back. And I think we need to take the sting out of the words racism, and I don't know, Hillary has so many isms and obias that I can't even name them all. But we need to take the power and the sting out of those words. Those are just words. The actions are what count. And I think we need to get together and we need to push back. We need to help you. You do all you can to push back for this terrible thing that's happening to you. But sometimes you can get deeper in by pushing back because you're not getting the support from our other congressmen in the state, the Republicans. They're all bailing out on you. They need to come and say, what he says he said. And you know, it's a free speech. The left gets to say anything they want to say, and they don't get pushed back. But the conservative person says something, and they get slammed. And that's their way of quieting the conservative voice, is to call an ism or an obia, and immediately they have to shut up. And I think it's wrong. I think we say, I said it, so what? I think we need to push all the way the other direction and get us back on an equal speaking playing field so that we can speak up our voice. And I encourage everyone to get on the internet. I know I speak on Facebook so much about what's going on in the country. We need to talk and to know what's going on. And it's really all I have more I could say, but I want to mention one other thing. You started to speak about your pro-life activity, and I'm sad to hear what's happening to the heartbeat legislation. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why it hit the courts and why it's being negated? Thank you,
Pam, and I'll wrap up in my closing statement here. Thank you. First, I'd say in response to your statement and your question, Pam, that we can do the things that you described, and we can at the same time embrace everything that Dr. Martin Luther King taught us, all at the same time. And if we had stuck with his vision, we wouldn't be in the place we're in today in this society, in this country. And so to the heartbeat, it's a bit of a longer story too, but I've been deeply engaged in the pro-life movement for a long time. I've spoken at the March for Life more times than I can count, and been, of course, involved in the March for Life more times than I can count. Nobody wonders where I stand on that issue. It came to me really clearly when, in 1976, when I held my firstborn. And I thought, how could anybody take this little child's life who was less than an hour old? How could anybody take his life a minute after he was born, or a minute before, or an hour, a day, or a week, or a month? When did his life begin? What is that definitive moment? And that's the moment of conception. And so that's always been the case for me, that human life is sacred in all of its forms, and life begins at the moment of conception, and it ends in natural death. That's, of course, where I've long stood. And Phyllis Schlafly was one whom I greatly admired. And Phyllis was a living, breathing icon in her time, and a great friend. And she often said that I was her favorite congressman, which put an extra responsibility on me, I thought. And but in any case, we lost Phyllis a couple of years ago. And I was there with her at the last Republican convention she attended, and she influenced everyone she was at. And I'm thinking about a heartbeat bill, but while I was sitting in that church, I went in and early to meditate and pray, and an individual came. I sat in the back, took me by the wrist and said, "You need to be up here up front where Phyllis would want you." And so I was led up to the second pew, sat down there, and it continued a discussion, and we were having a discussion about the heartbeat bill. Phyllis wanted me to introduce and draft one. And it was one of her last requests on her deathbed that I do that. And as this conversation was going on in very hushed tones, respectfully, but very quiet, because we're a half hour ahead of the funeral. And then they brought in, the Trumps, and David Bossie, and Kellyanne Conway, and Steve Bannon, all sat right in front of us, which we just kind of acknowledged each other, but that added meaning to it too. Phyllis believed that Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States. There weren't a lot of people in America that believed that at that time. And then, but there is where I made a commitment that I would draft a heartbeat bill and give everything I've got to push it through the United States Congress. I went back and did that, and we did a careful job to write as good a heartbeat bill as we could. And we put the slogan on it that says, if a heartbeat can be detected, the baby is protected. And we stood on that principle all along, introduced the legislation, got co-sponsors on it, all the way up to 174 co-sponsors on that legislation. But I hit a plateau at about 162, and I'm thinking, I'm not making this thing move further. We've got to find a way to do something else here before the end of the session. So in January, I called up State Senator Jason Schultz, and I said, Jason, do you think we could get a heartbeat bill introduced and moved through the Iowa legislature? He gave me a long political analysis, and the summary came down to yes. And so we wrote a bill and passed that off to Jason. He put it to the bill drafters. They came back to us a few times. We put some last changes in that. They introduced the heartbeat bill in the Iowa Senate, and Amy Sinclair, State Senator Amy Sinclair, floor managed that, and they passed it off the Iowa Senate floor in 24 minutes. It went over to the House, where it was a lot harder. We needed 51 yes votes. We had 35 when we started. My iPhone that I have on my belt today has a spreadsheet on it that's interactive in real time, and some of it is the whip list for the Iowa House members. And we worked that for 7 weeks to get to 51 votes. Finally got it passed, sent it to the governor's desk. We wanted to give her every opportunity to sign it, and she did, and I'm grateful. But we always expected that we would lose in court at the first levels, that we had to take this thing all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Because if you have a Supreme Court decision precedent, no lower court is going to challenge that and try to overturn it. So we should not despair if we lose at the district court level, or the appellate level, or the state Supreme Court level, or the district court level at the federal, or the appellate, or the circuit. We have to get this to this new court. And I said from the beginning, the strategy is this. We are likely to have a pro-Constitution Supreme Court. We didn't have that when I drafted the bill. And we expected that there would be, well, I said, let's see, we had the vacancy from Justice Scalia, who was a friend, by the way, and I just miss him a great deal. We had that vacancy, but we expected we would get an appointment, which turned out to be Gorsuch. And then I had the bill introduced and drafted, and people would say, well, the Supreme Court is never going to uphold your legislation. And I said, not this Supreme Court. I didn't write it for Justice Kennedy to determine this. I wrote it in anticipation of Kennedy's retirement. And a year and a half in advance, I predicted that Justice Kennedy would retire on June 30th. And a year and a half in advance, and I planned the strategy for that, for, I'll call him Gorsuch 2.0 to hear this case. That would be Matt Kavanaugh, as it turned out. Or Brett Kavanaugh, excuse me, as it turned out. And I'm sorry, I missed Kennedy's retirement by 2 days, a year and a half in advance. I didn't check the calendar. I had predicted he'd retire on a weekend. I should have known better. It was the 28th that he retired, as far as I know. But anyway, the strategy that I laid out on this was right for the sequence of events that unfolded. And I just could not get enough support because people didn't believe that we would have a court that would uphold it. And there are 3 top pro-life organizations in the country. And this is the part you really need to know. The leadership in the Iowa House at the time, Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, each individually in private one-on-one conversations, or maybe with one of my staff at my side, said, we're not moving your heartbeat bill until the top 3 pro-life organizations are asked for it to be moved, and we'll support it and push it. Well, Susan B. Anthony's list was behind it, and Tony Perkins' Family Research Council was behind it. The National Right to Life was not. And they have had the brakes on this thing all along. They are incrementalists. They don't want to take a chance and challenge the court. All of what they've done has been just trimming around the edges. And so, if I'm going to say it did not move, there are 4 entities that are the reason. National Right to Life is a big reason, but it's a decision made by the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Majority Whip that they won't move legislation unless National Right to Life approves it. And so that put the brakes on. And they were referred to as the Holy Trinity of National Right to Life, Susan B. Anthony, and FRC. I'm really frustrated by this because of what has happened now. We lost the majority when we could have set a bill over on Mitch McConnell's desk. We had the votes, and they wouldn't let us move it, and National Right to Life needs to answer for that, as do the leaders that gave them that level of authority. So that's what happened with Heartbeat. I'm not done. We've got 55 co-sponsors in this Congress. We think we can get to 174 with the Republicans we have left. And that's going to help move this thing. Again, we can never let up on this cause, and I will not. Thank you, Pam. Now just shift into there's a lot that I can maybe say in a conclusion here, but I'm going to go a little ways into somebody else's work. And it just kind of popped up, not quite by random this morning, but I was thinking about it. And I'm going to go a little ways into a poem written by Kipling. A lot of you will know this. And thinking about the kind of load that's been on me. By the way, if you go back through the sequence of events, they created a nearly perfect storm for this election. That nearly perfect storm didn't really start until October 25th. We were cruising along in August, we were up 21 points. And the first 3 days in October, we're up 20 points. No real difference. Then, 13 days out, we were up 18 points, in spite of all the negative that was poured on, in spite of all the money they were spending, and we hadn't spent a dime in advertisement yet. And in fact, in the last 4 times my name's on the ballot, we have averaged about $30,000 in ads is all we've bought, while they spend millions against me. But up 13 days out, up 18 points, and on the 25th of October, there was an article that was written in the Washington Post that said, I had done a meeting with Nazi sympathizers in Vienna. That story is false as it can be. I can fill you in with lots of detail. I'm not going to take time to do that. It's easily proven. Any reporter should have known the difference. They wrote that story in the Washington Post, and it went viral, and others write stories off of that story. And Jeff says tens of thousands of stories emerge out through all this cyberspace that has just went viral. That kind of started the beginning of, it started a nearly perfect storm. And then we had the Weekly Standard Center reporter out here. He wrote 3 nasty, dishonest stories. And one of them said that I called Mexicans dirt. Of all the people in that room that day, he was the only one that held that position. And so, in fact, There was a Reuters reporter there that didn't see it. NBC News covered it with television. I had fuzzy mics in front of me. Who thinks I would do that with fuzzy mics hanging in front of my face? I mean, there's thousands of hours of tape out there of speeches I have given. There's nothing like that that came out of my mouth. They reported it, though, because one person thought that was right. By the way, that magazine is now defunct. The Weekly Standard is gone, and what they did here in Iowa was the last straw for the owner, and he shut that place down. And I knew about it a week before they did. So, but if you take that out of the equation, that story, the Washington Post story, the Weekly Standard story, and if you take the New York Times story out, then it pretty much scrubs clean and erases the whole chalkboard because it emanates from that. It doesn't mean there are people that don't want to make a change here, but I will tell you of all the reasons there, the biggest reason is they want to control who is nominated for President of the United States. And they know if they can shut down a conservative voice in Northwest Iowa, they've got a lot better chance of getting their establishment candidates nominated through the Iowa caucus process. And I've been involved in this going clear back to the 80s. And if you notice, who came out early against me? Mitt Romney, lost in Iowa twice. Jeb Bush spent $130 million and got less than 1% of the vote. He had the same campaign managers or operatives between those two guys. And so, why do they come out early? I think they have a reason. You can ask them, but the pattern is there. The neocons that emanate from the Weekly Standard and those folks, and they're trying to control you. Well, what we are here is we're full spectrum constitutional Christian conservatives. We want the rule of law. We want strong families. We want to protect life. We want to protect our rights to keep and bear arms. We want to protect all of our constitutional rights and protect, preserve, and defend an America that our founding fathers envisioned. And we need to be refurbishing the pillars of American exceptionalism. And they do not exist in any better form than they do right here in Iowa. And so, as I was reflecting this morning, I looked up to refresh myself because I couldn't get it all from memory. But this poem by Kipling, and it's titled If. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, not dealing lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good or talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it all on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, if you can walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more. You be a man, my son.
Thank you all very much for coming out today. I know that we have a lot of people with the local, regional, and national media that had a long drive. And also, thanks most of all to the local folks of O'Brien County and the surrounding area for coming out. Drive safely.
been live on the